Michael Church, Crawl Space Ninja. Guess what? This is the third video in our questions to ask your local crawl space encapsulation contractor. If you did not get a chance to check out video 1 and video 2, I'm going to put a link to those down below. Let's get started. If you're new to Crawl Space Ninja, we talk about everything related to crawl space encapsulation and waterproofing. We hope you'll subscribe to our channel, ring that notifications bell, follow us on Facebook, and make sure you check out our DIY store and our franchise opportunities. So we ended the last video on some questions to ask about mold and different things like that. So I'm going to start this one off with waterproofing, okay? So waterproofing is what happens when you're addressing flooding inside of the crawl space, right? So you know you have a mold problem, you're going to get that taken care of. You know how to ask those questions in the last video. But what about waterproofing? First of all, Mr. Crawl Space Encapsulation Contractor, do you offer waterproofing or water management? That would be the first thing I would ask them. And if they do, then I would ask them what type of water management or waterproofing do they offer? Do they offer a buried pipe that goes around the inside of the perimeter that hits a sump pump and then gets discharged out of there? Or do they put some kind of dimple underlayment down to move the water out of that exit point? Do they cut a hole in the footer or the foundation and run some kind of gravity-fed drain line out of the crawl space? Do they just lay the pipe on the ground like we've seen many contractors do and don't even bury it? Ask them how they waterproof if they do waterproof. A couple more things about waterproofing is how many linear feet apart are the sump pumps going to be placed? In other words, if you've got a 300 linear feet crawl space, you would probably need at least 2 sump pumps in that situation. We recommend one about every 140 linear feet because it's very difficult for water to travel a really long distance inside of these pipes because they're gathering water in every area of the crawl space most of the time. So you want to make sure there's enough exit points for that discharge, for that water to discharge out of the crawl space. So how many linear feet do you set your sump pumps? Another question in regards to waterproofing is, will you be installing and attaching a vapor barrier as part of your waterproofing process? Because believe it or not, throwing down some loose laid vapor barrier or recycling your old vapor barrier when installing a waterproofing system is not very effective. The water's going to flood in, move the vapor barrier, then you got water on top of the plastic that can't even make its way into the waterproofing system. So ask them how they plan on installing a vapor barrier as part of that system. As I mentioned in the second video about dehumidifiers, I want to talk to you about ventilation. Most crawl space encapsulation companies have never heard of this concept before, but according to the EPA, you're supposed to ventilate 1 CFM of air for every 50 square feet of crawl space. So what we do is a combination of humidity control with ventilation. So you've got to have that dehumidifier to control humidity. But Mr. Crawl Space Contractor, are you going to install some type of foundation vent fan or active ventilation to move those soil gases like radon or methanes or smells out of the crawl space on a continual basis? Because those gases can build up inside the crawl space when you seal off all the vents and go directly into the living space. So you want to make sure you take care of that as well. So the 17th question I would ask that crawl space encapsulation contractor is, what type of vapor barrier do you use? Do you use a cheap 6 mil plastic that you're only going to throw on the ground, and if they attempt to attach it to the wall, it'll rip because the nail will rip it out, or something like that? So make sure you're using a good solid vapor barrier. We use a 12 mil non-reinforced. It's a solid piece of plastic. It's an extruded virgin plastic, so it's new materials that's being used. And it doesn't have the potential of smelling like any kind of cat urine. If the moisture gets between those vapor barriers and gets on that nylon reinforcement, it can give off an odor in some instances, depending on how cheap the plastic is. So ours doesn't have the ability to do that. So ask them what kind of plastic they're using and make sure that they install that type of plastic. So with the installation of the plastic comes the methodology in which it is installed. In other words, a lot of times they'll cut the plastic around pillars and different things like that, or they have pieces joining together from the wall to the floor. So make sure, ask them how much overlap is there going to be between 2 pieces of plastic joining. The minimum requirement is 6 inches. We like to go at least 12 inches if possible of overlap, okay? So if they're installing an encapsulation or a plastic for an encapsulation, make sure they're installing it at least the overlap of a minimum of 6 to 12 inches. Once the plastic is overlapped, how do you plan on sealing or joining those overlaps together? We recommend you use at least a 4-inch seam tape. There's a lot of different seam tapes out on the market, but you can check ours out at our DIY store. But we overlap the plastic, like I said, about 12 inches, and then we use a really good waterproof pressure adhesive seam tape. That way it holds those joints really good, because just like anything, that is going to be the weak spot of the plastic, is where you have to join those together. So properly overlapping them and taping them properly is a great way to keep those flood waters from getting up on top of the plastic. And now my last question that you should ask them is, how are you going to attach the plastic to the pillars and the walls? Are you going to use a mechanical fastener, which is what we recommend, or are you going to use an adhesive or a caulk? Believe it or not, most adhesives and caulks do fail over time. Even a butyl tape will eventually fail if it is the only thing used to hold up the vapor barrier. So if you're a DIYer, we like for you to use that butyl tape as part. It gives you a helping hand in keeping that plastic up, but we also want you to mechanically attach that plastic to the concrete or to the block wall or brick or whatever it is you're using if possible, so that way it stays up forever. So what is your methodology for attaching the plastic to the foundation wall or the pillars? So that'll do it for me. I am Michael Church with Crawl Space Ninja. We hope these were some great questions you can ask your local contractor. We hope you make it a happy and blessed day, and we'll see you later.